Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Spark Coronavirus Roundup. It's been a month since we started bringing you these updates. It's felt like an eternity. And at home, we've certainly noticed some changes. A lot more snacks, more sweatpants, things are getting pretty casual. I think my team at NAVC has noticed some small changes for me as well. But what about you? What's happened out there in the vet industry over the last month? To help us understand exactly what the changes are, VetWatch is an initiative to collect surveys and data and then assess the impact of the coronavirus on the veterinary community. Dr. Travis Meredith is the director of the Vetalytics Initiative and a practice owner in Pennsylvania. He says so far, 3 trends really stick out for him as a practice owner. First, the vast majority of clinics have had to change how they service their clientele. For instance, more than 80% of respondents are only offering curbside service. Second, clinics are being forced to make changes in their staffing levels, but they're trying really hard to maintain cash flow and keep their teams employed. 66% have reduced hours, but only 9% report letting people go. Lastly, almost half of respondents report putting off annual wellness exams.
And this is really concerning because these are those core contact points with clients for not just the vaccinating of a patient and the controlling of a disease and managing from an epidemiologic standpoint, but it's that opportunity to bond with owners. And so those become lost opportunities. They become pushed off. You're increasing the risk of patients being exposed to highly communicable diseases. You're losing revenue within the hospital, and probably more than anything, you're losing a connection point with clients.
The VetWatch platform also gives nationwide and regional data about practice revenue from a sample size of almost 6,000 clinics. So far, we're seeing that more than half of them are at or above their revenue level from the same time last year. Travis says things might get worse before they get better, but overall he's optimistic.
What it really communicates is how well the market was doing during the first 3 months of this year. When you combine that with the fact that you see the recent weeks of how abrupt and declined the revenue numbers have been, that shows you how impactful the past weeks have been, the effect of closings and state mandated shutdowns, especially with some of the severity that we've seen in the most recent weeks. The longer the duration of that severity, the more of the impact, and you will see more practices showing declines in revenue year over year. But in the same sense, I believe that as states start to open up, as the time frame starts to extend, as people get more comfortable living within this environment, you're going to see practices start to pick up revenue in many areas. And the impact of these week-to-week declines in revenue are not going to be as significant.
Dig into the data for your own region. Click the link on your screen to visit vetwatch.com. Now let's go to our story of the week, coronavirus in animals. News reports continue to roll in about pets being infected with SARS-CoV-2. Clients may be getting more anxious as these reports become more prevalent, but there is still no cause for alarm. If you'd like to get deeper into why, check out the latest podcast from Vetfolio. I spoke to Dr. Carlos Das Neves, a wildlife disease veterinarian and virologist. He gives a broad overview of what we know about the coronavirus in animals, its origins, what the diagnostic tests mean, and how it's being transmitted right now. Click the link on your screen to listen. Wildlife disease veterinarians like Dr. Das Neves are leading the way in the CoV-2 disease surveillance, researching the impact of wet markets on local food supply, taking a critical look at wildlife trade, and more. Joining me to talk about all of this is Dr. Sonia Hernandez, a UGA professor specializing in wildlife disease. Sonia, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dana.
So, you are a wildlife veterinarian. Tell me when this all started. What was your first reactions? What were you thinking as some of the early reports came out?
I hate to say that, unfortunately, I wasn't very surprised. I think everybody who works in my field has always said, not if the next pandemic, but when the next pandemic rolls around. We have all the circumstances for the transmission of viruses from animals to people to occur. And sadly, the one little bit that was missing was the human to human transmission. It already happened in a few other circumstances like SARS and MERS. And it just happened that with this one, it spread a lot faster than we could contain it. So a little bit is frustration, a little bit is resignation, a mixture of that.
Combination of things. So tell me a little bit, just from a day-to-day basis, humans are now staying home. So what does this mean for the impact on wildlife outside of our houses?
I think here in the US, especially where I live, one group that's probably quite glad that there aren't vehicles running around are turtles, right? This time of year is when we really worry about turtles that are coming out of ponds. The females are looking for nesting sites and they're often getting hit by cars. And that's just, one, I guess, relief for wildlife. On the opposite side, there's a lot of wildlife that depends on us for food, like either intentionally, like, when we feed ducks, or one of the species that I study, the ibis in parks, and they're going without, they're still gathering sometimes looking for people because they're habituated to getting food. And sometimes it's unintentional feeding, like, animals that go after our garbage. So you may have seen some of those really kind of creepy videos of rodents and rats running around the middle of Bourbon Street in New Orleans because they didn't have the usual trash. And the same, I'm seeing some raccoons kind of coming out and doing some things that we don't usually expect, not because of the disease, just simply because their food source has been disrupted.
Yeah, their garbage cans are getting less full or maybe more full or all sorts of odd things. So let's go back to the current theory is that this most likely came from bats. And poor little bats are relatively villainized. They're kind of considered a little creepy. Interestingly enough, virologists seem to have a love-hate relationship with bats. They're an important source and important carriers of several viral diseases. Tell me a little bit about how bats and bat research has been impacted by coronavirus.
Well, I think the minute that the stories about COVID-19 and SARS-CoV started coming out and its potential relationship to bats, that made sense to a lot of people who work with wildlife because, bats have been a source of the other two coronaviruses that have caused outbreaks in people, SARS and MERS. That there's been a lot of work to show that that's most likely how those two viruses originated. And of course, they're also the most likely source of other viral diseases like Nipah virus, Hendra, Ebola, etc. So it's not a surprise that this is the case, but we have to keep in mind a couple of important things. Number one is that, we've only provided bats the ecological opportunity to transfer those viruses to us very recently based on activities that we have undertaken. Habitat destruction and modification, bringing bats into wildlife markets, basically moving or changing their patterns, encouraging them to nest in urban areas. All of those things have made it easier for them to transfer viruses to us, whereas before they really could not.
My conversation with Sonia goes a lot deeper into the veterinarian's role in One Health and other topics. More than we could get into for this week's roundup. It's very much worth your time, so take a listen by clicking on the link on your screen. Sonia's perspective is one of several we've brought to you in the last month of weekly roundups. And now the pace of new information is slowing down just a little. So we're going to switch our approach to periodic updates. In the meantime, we still want you to stay positive. Have you heard of explore.org? It's a site where, among other things, you can watch live streams of animals from around the world, including this bald eagle nest in Decorah, Iowa. So after all, just remember, even though we're stuck inside, outside it's still spring. And many animals are actually thriving without humans interfering in their natural environment. Take a look at the website, enjoy those live feeds of animals, and take a minute to remember it is going to be okay. Let us know what you thought of today's episode or anything else on your mind. Send us an email at spark@navc.com or leave us a voicemail on SpeakPipe. Remember, you can remain anonymous or give us a way to get back in touch. We won't publish your message without your permission. We hope you'll join us again on the next roundup. In the meantime, be careful with your snacks and stay safe.